Good morning and welcome to Let the Bible Speak. My name is Alex Meredith. I'm the minister for the Marquette Church of Christ and the host of today's program. Glad you're here with me this morning. Today we are wrapping up this series we've been on for quite a while now, going through the Gospel of Matthew. And we're going to be wrapping this up today looking at Matthew chapters 27 and 28. Before we do that, though, I want to get to another passage. It's actually in the book of Deuteronomy, and this is going to serve as the background to lead us into Matthew itself. So in Deuteronomy chapter 21, verses 22 and 23, listen to this. If a man has committed a crime punishable by death, and he is put to death, and you hang him on a tree, his body shall not remain all night on the tree, but you shall bury him the same day. For a hanged man is cursed by God. You shall not defile your land that the Lord your God is giving you for an inheritance. There was a song that became quite popular. I'm not sure exactly when it was. I want to say around 2013 or so. It was actually written before that, but the song is called Mary Did You Know? I think it was a group, the Pentatonics, that did a cover of the song and put it on their Christmas album, and it exploded in popularity. But Mary Did You Know? And I wanted to read you the lyrics from this song because I think it's really insightful when we think about the crucifixion and resurrection. So listen to this. Mary, did you know that your baby boy would one day walk on water? Mary, did you know that your baby boy would save our sons and daughters? Did you know that your baby boy has come to make you new? This child that you delivered will soon deliver you. Mary, did you know that your baby boy would give sight to a blind man? Mary, did you know that your baby boy will conquer storms with his hand? Did you know that your baby boy has walked where angels trod? When you kiss your little baby, you kiss the face of God. The blind will see, the deaf will hear, the dead will live again. The lame will leap, the dumb will speak the praises of the Lamb. Mary, did you know that your baby boy is Lord of all creation? Mary, did you know that your baby boy would one day rule the nations? Did you know that your baby boy is heaven's perfect lamb? That sleeping child you're holding is the great I Am. Mary, did you know? Now, when you look back at the birth accounts in both Matthew and Luke, it does seem like Mary knew something. It's not exactly clear how much she knew or understood. Back in Matthew chapter 1, verse 21, we know that she's told that this person, Jesus, will save the world from its sin, save Israel from its sin. Also in Luke chapter 1, verses 54 and 55, in her song, the Magnificat, Mary talks about, or rather sings about, how this birth is the way by which the Abrahamic covenant will be fulfilled. So she understands something about his importance, but could she really have understood the magnitude of what would really happen? I'm not so sure. So in Matthew 26, going into the beginning of chapter 27, Jesus gets arrested. We talked last time about a person of Judas Iscariot, one of the disciples who turns against Jesus. So Jesus ends up arrested, technically by the Romans, you could say, but really functionally by the Jewish leadership, by the high priest and the like. And so after he's arrested, he's actually brought before the high priest, brought before Caiaphas, and he's interrogated for the things that he has claimed and done and everything else. And they're so angry at him, they want him to see justice, except the problem is the Jewish leadership doesn't have authority in and of themselves to do anything to him. And so what they do is they deliver him to the Roman authorities with the hopes that the Romans will do their dirty work. And so they deliver him to the person of Pilate, Pontius Pilate, who's the governor over Judea at this time. Now, you've got to understand something about Pilate and the situation that he was in. Purportedly, by people like Philo and Josephus, historians living around that time, there was a tremendous amount of pressure on Pilate specifically to maintain peace with the Roman authorities and the Jewish people. There had been some incidents that had sparked those tensions, and you got to understand it is not in Pilate's interest to have unrest within his providence, because that shows his higher-ups in the Roman government that he doesn't know how to control his land and his people, right? So that's not going to look good for him if the Jewish people start to riot. And so it's in his interest to keep the peace, whatever that looks like. So it's actually in Pilate's interest here to do the bidding of the Jewish leadership, because he doesn't want to get them angry at him, right? Or else they could turn against him and turn the people against him. And meanwhile, Jesus had angered the Jewish leadership, and to some degree, even though Pilate may not have been super cognizant of this or understood the magnitude of it, had sort of taken on this threat against the Roman authorities in the triumphal entry, right? So that leads us into Matthew chapter 27. Let's read this section. This is Matthew 27, starting in verse 11. Now Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" By the way, Pilate was at this time known as the king of the Jews, taking over Herod's place. Jesus said, "You have said so." But when he was accused by the chief priests and elders, he gave no answer. Then Pilate said to him, "Do you not hear how many things they testify against you?" But he gave no answer, not even to a single charge, so that the governor was greatly amazed. Now, at the feast, the governor was accustomed to release for the crowd any one prisoner whom they wanted. And they had then a notorious prisoner called Barabbas. So when they had gathered, Pilate said to them, "Whom do you want me to release for you, Barabbas or Jesus, who is called Christ?" For he knew that it was out of envy that they had delivered him up. Besides, while he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent word to him, "Have nothing to do with that righteous man, for I have suffered much because of him today in a dream." Now the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas and destroy Jesus. The governor again said to them, "Which of the two do you want me to release for you?" And they said, "Barabbas." Pilate said to them, "Then what shall I do with Jesus, who is called the Christ?" And they all said, "Let him be crucified." And he said, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Let him be crucified." So when Pilate saw that he was gaining nothing, but rather that a riot was beginning, he took water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, "I am innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourselves." And all the people answered, "His blood be on us and on our children." That's quite prophetic, isn't it? Then he released for them Barabbas, and having scourged Jesus, delivered him to be crucified. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the governor's headquarters, and they gathered the whole battalion before him, and they stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him. And twisting together a crown of thorns, they put it on his head and put a reed in his right hand. And kneeling before him, they mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they spit on him and took the reed and struck him on the head. And when they had mocked him, they stripped him of the robe and put his own clothes on him and led him away to crucify him. There's a particular story in the Old Testament. It's known by the Jewish people as the Akedah. We call it sometimes the binding of Isaac. This is a story that's found in Genesis chapter 22 in the first 14 verses. Funny enough, this is the most frequently depicted within the Judeo-Christian community. This is the most frequently artistically depicted scene in the entire Bible, more so even than the crucifixion itself, oddly enough. So this is obviously a very important and impactful story. Let's see if we can figure out why. Here, Abraham has been told to bring his son Isaac, who, by the way, was the only means by which the covenant promises in Genesis 12 were going to potentially be accomplished. He was told to take his only son Isaac and to go sacrifice him on an altar. So listen to this. So Genesis 22, starting in verse 1. After these things, God tested Abraham and said to him, "Abraham," and he said, "Here I am." He said, "Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering." By the way, that word burnt offering or whole burnt offering is actually in the Greek, the way the Greek renders that, that's the word we get the word Holocaust from. Offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains on which I shall tell you. It's believed, by the way, that whatever mountain this was in the land of Moriah is where the temple eventually was built and where the Temple Mount still lies today. Verse 3, so Abraham arose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him, and his son Isaac. And he cut the wood for the burnt offering and arose and went to the place of which God had told him. On the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place from afar. Then Abraham said to his young men, stay here with the donkey. I and the boy will go over there and worship and come again to you. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son. And he took in his hand the fire and the knife. So they went, both of them together. And Isaac said to his father Abraham, my father. And he said, here I am, my son. He said, behold, the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? Abraham said, God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering, my son. Again, prophetic. So they went, both of them together. When they came to the place of which God had told him, Abraham built the altar there and laid the wood in order and bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to slaughter his son, but the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, here I am. Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, seeing as you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him was a ram, caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called the name of that place, the Lord will provide. As it is said to this day, on the mount of the Lord it shall be provided. I would like to point out that there is no further interaction. After this point, there is no record of any interaction between Abraham and Isaac ever again. Is it any surprise? The intention of God here. Now, there are going to be some critics who look at this story, and they have. They look at the story and say, wow, what an evil thing to do, to command a father to take his son and to sacrifice him. But that was never his intention. God's intention was never for Abraham to follow through with his sacrifice. First of all, it was to test him. We're actually told that in the first verse, right? In order to test Abraham, right? So it was for testing. That's part of the answer there. Here's the other thing. The reason that Abraham does this, I really think, is in order to set himself apart from the other Canaanite gods and goddesses that did require things like child sacrifice. It was to separate the worship of Yahweh from the worship of people like Baal, with whom child sacrifice was a very regular practice. We know this archaeologically, by the way. So there was a sacrifice known as a Molech sacrifice. Now, when I say Molech sacrifice, it's not abundantly clear what this means precisely. There are some people who argue that Molech is actually the name of the god to whom children were sacrificed. But Molech literally translates to something like through the fire. And so some people think it more has to do with the process rather than the god to whom the children were sacrificed. In any case, this Molech sacrifice was a horrible, horrendous ordeal. I'm going to tell you the PG version of it. So it was horrible. What would happen is you would have a couple who would have a child, ideally a male, and if they were to have this child, what they would often do is they would bring that child to the priests of Molech or to the priests of Baal for a Molech sacrifice, and they would take the child to this statue, an infant. This is a newborn baby, and this statue was. Part of it was cast in metal. I think part of it was just built by wood around it. But at least the main part of it was cast in metal. And it would have this outstretched arm. And going up the arm, it was sort of like a ramp that actually led to the chest cavity, or sort of around the stomach, where there would be an opening. And in that opening, there would be a pit, which would be a flame. It would be on fire. And the priests would take this child and take him up that ramp and put him into that pit. And meanwhile, you had other priests who were beating on drums and chanting in order to drown out the sound of the crying child so that the parents didn't change their mind or try to go run in after the child. The whole purpose of this, in their way of thinking, was that this was a way to sacrifice to the gods to ensure future prosperity. So yeah, they would lose one child, but if they could do that to secure the next 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 children that they had, they were willing to make that sacrifice, right? That was the way that they thought about it. Now, quite tragically, there were times, even in Israelite history, because this was something native to Canaanite religion, and because when they moved into Canaan, they didn't totally obliterate the religious practices like they should have, there were times when Israel fell prey to these practices. One such verse was misinterpreted on occasion. It's in Exodus chapter 13, verse 2. Listen to the wording. Consecrate to me all the firstborn, whatever is the first to open the womb among the people of Israel, both of man and beast, is mine. Now, what does that mean? Consecrate to me the firstborn. Now, if you live in a Canaanite society with whom child sacrifice was normal, you might think that means go sacrifice your child. That's not what consecrate means. Consecrate means to set aside. It means to make holy, right? To dedicate. It doesn't mean to sacrifice your child. Because when we look at other places in Scripture, we see that this idea of sacrificing your child, it's abhorrent, and it's not something that's commanded. So, for example, I'll just read a couple of these to you. Leviticus chapter 18, verse 21 on the topic. You shall not give any of your children to offer them to Molech, there's that name, and so profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. Over in Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 31. Here we go. 12, verse 31 reads, You shall not worship the Lord your God in that way, for every abominable thing that the Lord hates, they have done for their gods. They even burn their sons and their daughters in the fire to their gods. And then I'll just go over to Jeremiah, this last one, just so you can see how God really feels about it. In Jeremiah chapter 19, God is talking about some of the abominable practices that Israel adopted in their lowest points. And in Jeremiah chapter 19, verse 5, it reads, They have built the high places of Baal to burn their sons in the fire as burnt offerings to Baal, which I did not command or decree, nor did it come into my mind. It wasn't even something that God would have thought of to do. The reason that they did this, though, is pretty obvious. For one, they had this transactional understanding of God, that if he's kind of like a vending machine, that's the way they thought of him anyway. If you put enough money in, you'll get out what you want, right? It was a very transactional relationship. The other side of it, of course, is that the most valuable thing to sacrifice, if you want to show your devotion, the most valuable thing that you can sacrifice is your own child. And so, go to Matthew chapter 27. Most valuable thing you can sacrifice is your own child, maybe even your own son. Matthew 27, starting in verse 32. As they went out, they found a man of Cyrene, Simon by name. They compelled this man to carry his cross, and when they came to a place called Golgotha, which means place of a skull, they offered him wine to drink, mixed with gall. But when he tasted it, he would not drink it. And when they had crucified him, they divided his garments among them by casting lots. Then they sat down and kept watch over him there. And over his head they put the charge against him, which read, This is Jesus, the King of the Jews. Then 2 robbers were crucified with him, one on the right and one on the left. And those who passed by derided him, wagging their heads and saying, You who would destroy the temple in 3 days, and rebuild it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross. So also the chief priests with the scribes and elders mocked him, saying, He saved others. He cannot save himself. He is the King of Israel. Let him come down now from the cross, and we will believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God deliver him now, if he desires him, for he said, I am the Son of God. And the robbers who were crucified with him also reviled him in the same way. Now from the 6th hour there was darkness over the land until the 9th hour. And about the 9th hour Jesus cried out with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, that is, my God, why have you forsaken me? That's from Psalm 22, by the way. And some of the bystanders, hearing it, said, This man is calling Elijah. And one of them at once ran and took a sponge, filled it with sour wine, and put it on a reed, and gave it to him to drink. But the other said, Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to save him. And Jesus cried out again with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit. And behold, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and the earth shook and the rocks were split. The tombs also were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And coming out of the tombs after his resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many. When the centurion and those who were with him, keeping watch over Jesus, saw the earthquake and what took place, they were filled with awe and said, Truly, this was the Son of God. Mary, did you know about this tragic crucifixion at the moment when Jesus was lying there in the manger? Did you have any idea what he would go through? Probably not. But just when it seems like all is lost and it seems like Christ has been defeated and the purposes of God have been thwarted, God will turn that apparent defeat by his power into triumphant victory. Because what happens after the crucifixion? Well, if we start in Matthew 27:57, what happens? When it was evening, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who also was a disciple of Jesus. He went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Then Pilate ordered it to be given to him. And Joseph took the body and wrapped it in a clean linen shroud and laid it in his own new tomb, which he had cut in the rock. And he rolled a great stone to the entrance of the tomb and went away. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were there, sitting opposite the tomb. The next day, that is, after the day of preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered before Pilate and said, Sir, we remember how that impostor said, while he was still alive, after 3 days I will rise. Therefore, order the tomb to be made secure until the 3rd day, lest his disciples go and steal him away and tell the people he has risen from the dead, and the last fraud will be worse than the first. Pilate said to them, You have a guard of soldiers, go make it as secure as you can. So they went and made the tomb secure by sealing the stone and setting a guard. Now, after the Sabbath, toward the dawn of the 1st day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning and his clothing white as snow, and for fear of him the guards trembled and became like dead men. But the angel said to the women, Do not be afraid, for I know what you seek. I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he has risen, as he said. Come, see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples he is risen from the dead, and behold, he is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him. See, I have told you. There are a number of people, and I would say just generically in the world, a number of people try to take Christian celebrations like Easter and morph them into something that they are not. To many, Easter is an opportunity to have a big meal, maybe with family and friends, to play outside, to paint eggs, things like that. And some people even take it a little bit farther, talking about the arrival of spring and in some way almost turn it into this strange worship of Mother Earth or something like that. And for many people, that's what Easter is. And I'm not too concerned with whether or not Easter in and of itself is recognized by the outside world. But what I recognize is that exists because there is a broader attempt by the secular world to minimize what the gospel is, to turn it into something without substance. The gospel, let me make this very clear. The gospel is about the King of the universe humbling himself, becoming flesh, suffering and dying on the cross in order to sanctify a rebellious humanity, rising from the dead to give us a future hope of resurrection ourselves, leading us into God's eternal presence, giving us a means of sanctification, forgiveness of sins, so that we can stand before the throne of God and be deemed worthy to enter God's presence for all of eternity. That's what the gospel is about. The gospel is about the crucifixion and resurrection of Christ. It's not a morality tale. It is not about the shallow things. It is the most important thing in the world. And it turns out that that's actually perhaps a really good reason and really good occasion to go outside, be with friends and family, celebrate, to have a feast maybe, and to recognize all of the things that God has given us. Chief among those is his own Son, the most valuable thing he could have possibly given in the person of Jesus Christ. So with that, I'll say Happy Easter. Before I go, I want to tell you about some of the resources that we have to offer to our viewers. We have a Bible correspondence program, a course that you can partake in. It's a 7-part workbook series. You can either participate in this by mail, or you can also participate online through worldbibleschool.org. That's something that WBS themselves will arrange with you if you choose to do that online. If you don't have a Bible, we want you to have one. Just let us know that you would like one, and we'll be glad to send you one. There's no obligation or charge tied to that at all, of course. Our mailing address is up on the screen. You can reach us at P.O. Box 372, that is in Marquette, zip code 49855. You can also visit our website and find a lot of this information at letthebiblespeak.net. If you would like to listen to any of these episodes and you don't get the chance to catch it on Sunday morning, feel free to look us up on any one of those apps on the screen, on Spotify, Audible, iHeartRadio. Just search Let the Bible Speak UP. All of our episodes are on there as well. Feel free to join us at the Marquette Church of Christ at 11 if you're in the area. We'd love to see you. Until then, otherwise, I'll join you next week as we continue talking about Scripture. Have a wonderful week.